Hello students, welcome to the YouTube channel of Get Set Law by IMS. I'm your verbal ability mentor Sanjana ma'am, and I wanted to help you decode the logical reasoning section of CLAT 2023, right? So let's just see if if you are solving your CLAT PYQs are able to score well here, okay? And how exactly do we decode the passages? What is the quality of the passage, right? Is it difficult? Is it complicated to understand, or is it simple to understand? And right, and let's also take a look at the kind of questions that have been asked in the past. Okay, so we'll begin with the first passage now. Not that I'm going to read every bit here, but only read so much as is going to help us understand the important components of the passage. Okay, so the first statement here is quite important. Never miss the first statement. Even if you don't understand anything, at least make it a point to give it a read, right? So the depreciation of an economy's currency is not a matter of concern in itself. So in itself, just because an economy's currency is depreciating, it does not mean that you really have to worry yourself so much. The problem is that this decline against major currencies, it has to be viewed within a set of different factors. What different factors? Macroeconomic factors, okay? Always view it in a context. In this case, it becomes in the backdrop of macroeconomic factors, okay? Now, the author actually wants to talk about the depreciation in the value of the Indian rupee, okay? The recent one at that. It has been depreciating for a long time, right? And what is of concern now? This is important. What is concerning the author here is the rate at which the depreciation is occurring, right? And what are the factors that are leading to it, okay? So the factors have been talked about. The Russia-Ukraine war, it has disrupted supply chains, right? Leading to rise in prices in commodities and products, right? And it has actually increased inflationary trends. Hardening is increase in inflationary trends, okay? Which has caused major central banks to raise interest rates, right? And this is in turn forcing investors back to the safe haven of the US dollar, right? Because the US dollar, people have a perception that it's a safe currency. It actually is a safe currency, which means people are withdrawing reserves. So it is only leading to an appreciation in the value of the US dollar, right? Now, for India, this is creating problems, right? Because international prices are rising, especially of crude oil. It has led to a higher import bill and hence a greater demand for dollars, okay? Now, you don't really have to understand the binaries of how this works because we will never have the time to do that unless you really are familiar with the topic. Otherwise, just focus on the, information mentioned. High interest rates in developed country markets. I'm highlighting this because it's not developing, it's developed, right? And these high interest rates have caused a significant outflow of portfolio investments from India, okay, which is worsening the already climbing demand for dollars, right, from a rising import bill, okay. Now let's read further. In the face of these pressures, the rupee would decline in value, okay, as the rupee price of a dollar would increase substantially. Now, how does somebody stem the tide or tackle the issue? So one way the RBI can stem the tide would be to sell off dollars in the market so that we're able to ease the supply situation. But at the same time, what it means is that the value of the rupee can be contained, but the nation's foreign exchange kitty would start to erode further because you're already selling off dollars now. Okay, so this is what the RBI is doing, but is this the right thing to do? Because the RBI is now facing a challenge, okay, which is how much do we let the rupee depreciate and how much do we have to intervene or sell off dollars to prop it up, okay. Now the author talks about what are the possible consequences. Too much depreciation can again raise domestic inflation rates, as the rupee price of imports would raise cost of production. Then it can trigger a rise in policy-controlled interest rates while closely monitoring inflationary expectations. And the biggest challenge, this is an adjective used here, is to navigate the unpredictable international economic shocks in the near future, right? So the Indian economy's health is not exactly at its best, right? And exports are not enough to offset the loss here, right? So India's growth and employment situations are yet to become stable. The RBI has difficult choices. What is the choice? What is the dilemma? Controlling inflation, at the same time ensuring that growth is being stimulated and the rupee value is being stabilized without severely diminishing the economy's foreign exchange kitty. So the main idea is, what do we do in this situation where the value of rupee is continuously declining, right? How much do we have to let the rupee depreciate, and how much intervention is required at the end of RBI to sell off dollars? Because if we do it to a great degree, it can really drain wealth from the foreign kitty, foreign exchange kitty. Okay. And at the same time, we have to ensure that the economic situation in India is stabilizing, the rupee value is stabilizing. So this is me recapping the passage for you. Yes, you have to read the entire passage word for word, is what I can tell you. You cannot cherry pick information here, right? Unless you feel absolutely confident and you feel you can read a question and then come back and locate the answer to it later. Okay. Take a look at the first question for this passage. Now, which of the following is the author most likely to agree with? It is a major cause for concern if an economy's currency is depreciating. This is something that the author agrees with or agrees or doesn't agree with. Actually, this is wrong. The author says this in itself is not so much of a bother, as much as viewing the rupee in a different set of factors, macroeconomic factors. You have to view it from a different perspective. Currency depreciation is not a reason for worry in itself, which is actually extracted from the first line. But if the macroeconomic factors are not good, there may be a cause for concern. Mark B as the best option choice, right? Now, the fact that Indian rupee is witnessing a decline in value against major currencies is very worrisome. It sure is something that the author agrees with. But then again, always focus because it says most likely to agree with. And the better option, because we have so many keywords pointing to option B, you have to choose Bombay. Right? A central bank must always do everything in its power to stem the slightest depreciation of an economy's currency. This is something which is not really implied in the passage. The author does say that the RBI needs to tide over the problem, but it does not necessarily mean that it must always do everything. This is not given in the passage. It's not mentioned. It might be correct factually, but not really the best option choice. So B is the better choice here. Take a look at the next question. Based on the author's argument, which of the following would reduce the decline in value of the rupee? Appointing a new governor. Now you have to choose an option, right, which can reduce the decline in value of the rupee. Appointing a new governor of the RBI who has a better sense, how does this reduce the decline in value of the rupee? What essentially is a new governor doing? Nothing, right? So this is out. A steep increase in commodity prices and the continued disruption of supply chains, this actually furthers the decline. It does not reduce the decline. It will increase the decline. This is directly given in the passage. Hence, B is out, right? A reduction in worldwide inflationary trends. So, if the inflationary trends or inflation is increasing, right, there will be simultaneous reduction of interest rates also, right? And it can consequently lead to a reduce and decline of the rupee value. So C is the best option choice here. RBI buying as many dollars as possible from the market, the author actually views this with a lot of skepticism because it will then drain the foreign exchange kitty if it does so much of it, right? So this too is a very extreme step to take. So D is out. C is the best option choice. Next question, you have to choose an option which would weaken the author's argument. Now, the difficult bit about this question is that we don't know what the author's argument is because it's not mentioned. But we can still assume the central idea here is the author's argument. And let's just say if there are multiple arguments made in the passage, then the better way is for us to simply read an option and then see which of the following options is in contradiction to the fact or an opinion or an argument given in the passage. Look at option A. The Indian economy, you have to weaken it, okay, has been affected by global inflationary trends and the increase of interest rates in developed country markets. Now, this is something which is mentioned more as a fact, right? It does not weaken the argument in any way. It's already given. So, A is out. B, since developed country markets have increased their interest rates, global investors have pulled their investment out of other economies and routed them to such developed country markets. This does not weaken our argument. This again paints a very negative picture of the economy, right? This is already touched upon in the passage. So no way is this running contradictory to any of the ideas mentioned. Hence, B is out. As the demand for US dollar increases, it is likely the rupee price of a dollar would increase substantially. And that's actually a true fact mentioned in the passage. So in what way, students, do we think this is going to weaken our argument, right? Weakening an argument here would imply an option that can paint a positive picture or an improvement in the situation. So C is out. We're left with D, which says the Indian economy and currency are highly protected and have been insulated from the effects of global inflationary trends and the increase of interest rates in developed country markets. Now, students, if this is true, if this option were to be true, then we wouldn't be writing the passage in the first place. We wouldn't be so much concerned about the depreciation in the value of a rupee if the Indian economy is already insulated from the impact of inflationary trends. Right? And therefore, this is an option which actually weakens that negative picture mentioned in the passage. D, therefore, is the best option choice. This is a great question again. This actually tests you on your core fundamentals of critical reasoning here. Next question. Now, you have to strengthen the author's argument for why Indian exports may not be able to take advantage of a falling rupee. Okay. So, you have to strengthen this. What actually can go wrong and what can actually create another hindrance for Indian exports so that they're not able to take advantage of a falling rupee. Economies across the world are witnessing a slowdown, and in such economies, demand for imports decrease substantially. Read B, economies across the world are booming and there is an increasing demand for Indian exports. Now I'll tell you what, I didn't explain A. Let's look at it from a layman's perspective. Okay, we feel A is complicated, leave it for the time being. Look at B. If there is an increasing demand for Indian exports, it means that Indian exports will be able to tide over the problem in a manner. If there's an increasing demand for Indian exports, that only means we're going to fetch more money, right? So this actually does not strengthen it, it actually weakens the argument because it shows that Indian exports may be able to take advantage. So B is definitely out. A reduction in the volume of exports would be more than offset by the increased value of dollars that Indian exporters would earn. Okay. D says countries across the world have managed to find ways to insulate themselves from the effects of the Russia-Ukraine war and will need a lot of Indian imports to sustain their new growth models. So option D actually says we will need a lot of Indian imports to sustain their new growth models. If a lot of Indian imports is required, it means that the exports are going to increase, which again actually weakens the option here, right? Because it's able to show that Indian exports will be able to take advantage of a falling rupee. So option D is out. Look at C. A reduction in the volume of exports would be more than offset by the increased value of dollars that Indian exporters would earn. In a way, this does tell us that exporters will still be able to take advantage of the situation. So this is out. You have to choose an option which shows that Indian exports may not be enough to be able to take advantage of a falling rupee. Look at A. Economies across the world are witnessing a slowdown, and in such economies, demand for imports decreases substantially, which actually means the exports will not be able to tide it, right? Tide over the problem, marking A as the best option choice, right? So this was a slightly complicated question. Let's take a look at the next question. Now, based on the author's arguments, which of the following must necessarily be true? Look at option A. The continuing depreciation of the Indian rupee at its current rate, coupled with worldwide inflationary trends, would result in immense political instability in India and consequently in all of South Asia. What is wrong about the option is, firstly, we're not talking about South Asia. Second, political instability is wrong. Economic instability, if it were there, it would make sense, but not political instability, not mentioned. If nothing else is done, the rise of interest rates in developed country markets, coupled with hardening of inflationary trends across the world, will result in a fall in the value of the rupee against the dollar. And this is exactly what is captured. In all likelihood, B has to be the correct option choice. But still, let's take a look at C and D. If inflationary trends continue to harden across the world, and if interest rates in developed country markets continue to rise, portfolio investors will increase their investments in India. If anything, they are going to withdraw their investments is what is mentioned. So just a plain reading of this statement will tell you C is wrong. D says if nothing else is done, the rise of interest rates in developed country markets, coupled with hardening of inflationary trends across the world, will result in a rise in the value of the rupee against the dollar, right? So the rise of interest rates in developed country will result in a rise in the value of the rupee against the dollar. What is wrong is that the value of the rupee is not going to rise, it's going to reduce. So D is factually incorrect. So B is the best option choice for this particular question. And next again is more like an inference-based question. So multiple inference-based questions. One question on assumption, one question on strengthen, one question on weaken have been asked. Now, which of the following is the author most likely to agree with? The RBI must not focus solely on preventing the depreciation of the rupee, as that may result in negative impacts on other aspects of the economy, right? The RBI must focus solely on preventing the depreciation of the rupee at all costs, since it is by far the most important indicator of the health of the Indian economy. The decline in the value of rupee in itself is not worrisome, right? So you cannot say that it has to focus solely on preventing this. So base out. Periodic inflationary trends are normal in any economy. Nowhere is this mentioned in the passage, right? That it's normal. So cancel C. The RBI need not do anything, which is an absolutely absurd option choice. It definitely needs to do something, right, to stem the tide. So D is out. The best option choice is A. Because if we focus solely on preventing the depreciation, then it can really lead to a lot of other, negative impacts. So A is the best option choice here. Let's take a look at the next passage. Now, the next passage is simple read. It talks about how the pandemic has both positively and negatively impacted the print media. In this case, we're talking about the newspaper media. So, there is some information in the passage which will tell you that, social media has just been something as a platform that has spread a lot of misinformation. As opposed to this, pandemic saw a surge in the rate of readership for print media, right? The finding is consistent with the heartening surge in public endorsement of the reliability of newspapers, right? So there was a survey which attempted to examine the impact of the lockdown on reading patterns, right? And it found that the number of readers who used to spend over an hour in newspaper every day had risen to 38%, which is like up from 16% in the pre-lockdown period. So till this part, I think the passage is painting a positive image of how the pandemic has impacted newspaper readership, okay? And it is now witnessing increased trust in newspapers because the lockdowns coincided with the dissemination of the crudest kinds of misinformation that was actually spread by social media, okay? Because social media, if anything, has become a harbinger of falsity, okay? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tell you that you don't always have to read all the information here. Here I feel whatever little I've underlined will help me understand the important idea as well. When you read further, and this is important, always focus on but, however, that is where the good news ends. Fair enough, okay? For the print media. Why? Because according to data collated by the survey, it found deepening footprints of social media, which means social media has still been able to perpetrate, okay, in rural and urban constituencies, while television continues to dominate the screen, right? And it's consistent with global trends that reveal that the newspaper industry is struggling to contain the migration of readers from reading newspapers to now being actively involved in social media and revenue to other formats, which is digital media. So we have newspaper media versus digital media, right? So ironically, the pandemic, which has saw a resurgence in collective trust in newspapers, it in a way has also negatively affected, what did I say in the beginning? Adversely affected the print media, as traditional advertisers, they were reeling under the economic consequences of the pandemic. They had to cut back on advertisement, right? Now, that is one thing. The other most important point is, because we've already used a but, this crisis is not something that has happened just because pandemic was there. It started before pandemic, right? So it precedes the pandemic, because newspapers have been outspaced by speedier, which means newspapers aren't that speedier compared to other media, right? Also, spurious, fake. Spurious here implies fake sources of information, right? And at the same time, the dominance of the image over text, it's a cultural phenomenon, is another really big challenge, right? So if the media hopes to remain competitive and profitable, it has to use this collective trust as a form of capital, right? The author also, draws on some suggestions towards the end that, the revenue model, it need to be re-explored. And the emphasis has shifted to in-depth analysis of news as well as eye-catching layouts now that newspapers are slower to reach news to the audience, right? So the author does mention some very small suggestions towards the end, but the passage talks about both the positive impact and the negative impact of COVID on print media, that is newspaper media. Having said that, let's look at the questions one by one. The first question: which of the following is the author most likely to agree with? This is an inference-based question, right? The pandemic was an unmitigated disaster for the newspaper industry, but not entirely, because it did positively affect the readership also. So A is out. It had negative as well as positive effects. And this is the best option choice, right? Nowhere is it mentioned that it had only good effects, right? So out. And it's wrong to say that it had zero effect at all on the newspaper industry. So D is out. D is the best option choice. The next question, now you have to weaken the author's argument. So again, which argument is not mentioned? I'd rather suggest we look at all the options and look for that option which runs in contradiction to the idea mentioned in the passage. Social media is a reliable source of true and accurate news and information. In the passage, it's given that social media is a harbinger of falsity. So when we say it's a reliable source of true and accurate news, don't you think it runs directly contradictory to this statement? And therefore, this is the best option choice. Social media is a highly unreliable source. This only strengthens, this is essentially what the author is trying to say. Is it a good way for people to stay connected with each other? You might ask, but ma'am, this too paints a positive picture of social media. But we're not talking about networking and connection amongst people, because this is not a topic of concern here, right? Social media is a speedier source of information than newspapers. That's true, but we have to weaken it, right? So D is out. The best option choice is option A. The next question, now, which of the following would be an effective way of making print media more competitive? Okay, slowing down the process of print media, how does it become more competitive? We have to make it a speedier source of information. Using more expensive printing methods that achieve better print quality. The print quality per se is not a problem. Image over text might be, but not the print quality. So B is out. Only publishing newspapers in alternate days, this will actually reduce readership in a way, don't you think? So C is out. We're left with D, which is the best option. Developing ways of ensuring that print media can reach readers more speedily. Perfect option choice. Next question. Now you have to choose an option which would weaken, right? It says, which of the following, if true, would have resulted in the weakening rather than deepening of public trust in newspapers. So the pandemic positively impacted readership because it is characterized by a collective surge in public trust in newspapers. Now you have to choose an option that weakens public trust. That can happen when, newspaper or print media, like social media, is also perpetuating false news, fake news, spurious news, misinformation, right? Don't you think the best option choice, just because I have explained this, is C, that newspapers actively disseminated misinformation? Then it has to weaken public trust instead of deepening it, right? So again, if A, you choose A, it says they reported accurate and true news. This will only lead to a deepening of public trust, not weakening, right? Same is the case with B. If newspapers are playing a leading role in exposing lies, then this too deepens public trust, right? And same is the case with option D. Only option C best fits the bill here. Next question. Now, what would the impact on readership and revenues of the print media if the image were not dominant over text as a cultural phenomenon, right? If image were not dominant over text. So the problem is that for the print media, the newspaper media, as the information suggests in the passage, the idea of the image being dominant over text, this is just leading to people, not relying on newspaper that much because it's not that catchy, and relying more on digital media or other forms of media apart from it. So if the image were not dominant over text, then we will not see that the print media is going to suffer so much the way it suffers now, right? It would not suffer as much of a reduction in readership and revenues as readers shifted to other formats, because now image were not that dominant over text. Best option choice is option A. You cannot choose B, because it will run contradictory to the idea. Image, if it's dominant over text, then print media would suffer a great reduction. But if it's not that dominant, and it's almost the same as text, for people it doesn't really matter if we have more of images or less of images now compared to text, right? So this is wrong, right? And we cannot say that there is no impact. There is definitely an impact on readership, but a positive one at that, as there will be a reduction, less of a reduction in readership, right? There would be an increased demand from readers that newspapers carry more images and less text. This is something that I like to call an out of the context option, right? So A is the best option choice. Next question. How does the author suggest newspapers can overcome the problem of being outpaced by speedier sources of information? So what is the suggestion like? Let me give you an interpretation of the question. right? What exactly is the quality of the suggestion that the author has forwarded? So does the suggestion offer direct means by which newspapers can become faster to publish? No. Absolutely wrong. There is no direct suggestion given per se. They encourage a complete and immediate shift to digital media, something which is not given and something which when you read is actually very extreme. So B is out. They offer ways to reduce production costs, which would offset the losses. In what ways do you think the last two statements are offering any idea on reducing production costs? Not given. Hence, C is out. D says they offer alternative means for newspapers to become competitive. That's sort of touched upon, right? But do not solve the problem of how newspapers can become faster sources of information. Yes, they have definitely mentioned. It's mentioned in the passage that it's time for newspaper media to become speedier. But in what ways? That's not given. So C is the best option choice. That's a brilliant question, actually. Let's focus on the next passage. Now, the broader theme of this passage is, the energy conflict. Are we to focus more on renewable sources of energy or non-renewable sources of energy? Just the broader theme of it, okay? So it says developed countries are battered because, firstly, we focused on developed countries. They're battered because of a fast heating planet. This is definitely impacting everybody, right? Temperatures have increased, droughts and extreme weather is also there, right? And on the other hand, the ordinary people in these countries, which countries? Developed countries, they are worried. Why? Not just because of climate change. So we are discussing climate change also, okay? But because of the lack of energy to heat their homes this coming winter. So there's another problem that they're facing, okay? In the US, gas prices went up in summer, so much so that people traveled less and consumption of fuel dropped, okay? So everything is just having a cascading effect here, right? But now prices are down and it is business as usual. Now, another very important point is now this energy disruption has really given a much needed push to the fossil fuel industry. Okay, now governments are asking this industry to supply more. In a way, fossil fuels are seeing a sort of surge in their demand, right? Europe has literally given natural gas a very important status here, right? Natural gas is a fossil fuel less polluting than coal, but still a major emitter of carbon dioxide. But now Europe calls it clean, which is an anomaly, right? US has also passed a climate bill which will invest in renewable energy but conditional to increase spends on oil and gas, right? Which again is non-renewable, and opening up 1 million hectares of federal land for drilling, right? So again, Europe, even in this desperate scramble for gas, is working to ramp up its investment in renewable power. So it is the worst of times. But the most important aspect is this is actually pushing the fossil fuel to produce more. Demand for fossil fuels has increased. So the author says it can be good, it could be bad, depending on some factors. There are some disclaimers he'd like to share, which is that this rising or renewed interest in fossil fuels, however, it shouldn't be a permanent thing. It should be temporary because ultimately at the end of the day, fossil fuels will emit carbon dioxide, which is going to heat up the planet even more, right? So it has to remain a temporary problem only, okay? Given the nature of economies, once investment has been made in this new infrastructure or the supply of fossil fuel has increased from new oil and gas discoveries, it will be difficult to wean off, okay? So these countries should not be entitled to use more of fossil fuels. They need to reduce emissions drastically and leave whatever little carbon budget space that is remaining to poorer countries to use, thereby satisfying such poorer countries' demands. Just a couple of suggestions that the author has shared towards the end. Okay. Otherwise, the passage, the broader themes are, climate change, how it's negatively impacting everybody, lack of renewable sources of energy, the increase in demand for fossil fuels, right? Having said that, let's take a look at the questions one by one. Again, inference, which of the following is the author most likely to agree with? People in the US are not worried at all about the climate change. Absolutely wrong. They are battered. People in the US are worried about climate change, and these concerns affect their energy consumption habits more than anything else. It's clearly mentioned that they're sad not just because of climate change, but because of other factors also. One is that they don't have enough, sources to heat up for the coming winter. So B is out. Climate change has resulted in the increase of energy prices across the world, and as a result, governments have had to invest in finding newer sources of renewable energy. Now, this is something which is not directly given that the governments have had to invest in finding newer sources of renewable energy. In fact, what is given is this has led to the government investing more in the fossil fuel industry. So C is out. Changes in the energy consumption habits of people in the US are affected more by energy prices than concerns of climate change. So the best option choice is option D. Next question. Now, which of the following is most similar to the author's statements about developed countries' renewed interest in fossil fuels? Now, the author has given some caveats, which is that you shouldn't be over-reliant on the fossil fuel industry. It should be a temporary fuse. It should be a temporary solution to the problem only. So, developed countries should not invest any resources in fossil fuel energy extraction. No. For that, the author definitely seconds them that to a certain degree, we can use this as a temporary situation. So, option A is out. Things could improve if developed countries recognize the difficulty of moving away from reliance on such sources of energy and make a conscious effort to move to alternative renewable energy sources quickly. This is ultimately what the author ends the passage with. So B is the best option choice. Since investments in energy extraction of any kind are very expensive, developed countries must ensure that they make permanent investments in fossil fuels. Absolutely not given. The opposite is mentioned, that there should be a temporary, transient solution. Developing countries must not consume fossil fuels. No, it's given that the developed countries should leave whatever little carbon budget is remaining to be utilized by the poorer countries, which in this case implies the developing countries, okay? So option D is absolutely running contradictory to the idea. Best option choice is option B. Next is, if the information in the passage above is correct, which of the following must necessarily be true? Look at A. The fossil fuel industry will face reduced sales in the short term. So, given the situation, as has been mentioned in the passage, because there is a more push for fossil fuels, it's only going to lead to an increase in the demand, right? It's going to see an increase in sales and not reduction in sales. So, this is out. The cost of making, installing, using solar panels will reduce substantially. We don't have any information pointing to this. So, option B is out. Passing a bill in the US is a huge effort, and it would not have been possible to pass a new climate bill unless the current energy crisis had compelled lawmakers to do so. Do you see how distorted this option choice is? In no way is this even remotely given or implied in the passage. D is the best option. The fossil fuel industry will see an increase in business, at least in the short term, for as long there exists a demand for it. So D is the best option choice. Now, in this question, you have to weaken the author's argument about why travel and fuel consumption reduce in summer, right? So, the best option choice here, you can easily eliminate option A, B, and D. They're really hollow options. Best option choice is option C for this particular question. The next question, now, which of the following would resolve the conundrum the author says developed countries face now? So the development of adequate renewable power sources in the near term, that would lead to a reduction in consumption of fossil fuels. When you read option A, plain reading would tell you that this is likely going to tackle the conundrum here, the dilemma here. Because ultimately, relying on the fossil fuels has to be a short-term solution only and not a longer term. So we have to invest more in renewable power sources, and if we are able to develop adequate reserves of them, it's going to be helpful. So option A is the best option choice. No, you don't have to find new sources of fossil fuels. It's a temporary solution, right? Switching immediately to renewable power sources, even if it leads to a shortage in energy. So not at the cost of this. So option C is out. Providing adequate aid to poorer countries so that they can develop. But in what way? So you see how distorted option D is again. Why can't we just leave it to the rich developed nations also, right? So this is not given, not implied, very hollow as an option. So D is out. The next question. So assuming that the aim of the climate bill is to reduce fossil fuel consumption, which of the following would be the strongest argument that it will fail to achieve such an aim? Okay. Look at option A. The bill promotes investments in renewable energy but does not provide for enough increase in investments in developing more sources of fossil fuel powered energy. You know, the problem with option A is we don't really have to focus more on increasing the investments. This is a temporary solution. Option A is out, right? We have to focus on the requirement of the question that the aim is to reduce fossil fuel consumption, right? So which would be the strongest argument that it will fail to achieve this reduction in fossil fuel consumption? You see B is out because the language per se is not a problem, right? Look at C. The bill is self-defeating since it makes investments in renewable energy conditional to more expenditure on oil and gas and making millions of hectares of federal land available for drilling, which would lead to an increased consumption of fossil fuels. This in itself is the best option choice. It tells you how paradoxical this bill is. Ultimately, you just want to come up with more land for drilling to be able to increase investments in fossil fuels. In what ways can we expect them to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels then, right? So it's self-defeating, best option choice, right? Option D, again, you can eliminate because you already have the correct option choice on you now, right? So C is the better option here. Let's take a look at the next passage. Now, of all the passages, this was the easiest. I think this passage was entirely a full scorer. Okay, so it talks about gender gaps essentially, especially in the workplace. So while men and women are both considered to be more capable as they get older, but only women bear the brunt of being seen as less warm as they age. Okay, so we are just relying on some researchers here, right? So it says that there are some stereotypes or perceptions about women when they age, and they're so hardwired and deeply entrenched that they come out even when absolutely identical information is provided about a man and a woman. Let's read further. Now, it says that female professors witness a decline as they move from the 30s to 40s, hitting an all-time low around the age of 47. Okay? All this, the evaluation of male professors, however, remains consistent. So, age factor does not really affect male professors here, according to the study, right? And after the age of 47, interestingly, okay, this is an anomaly, the evaluations for women increased again, becoming equal with those of men around the early 60s, right? Because we have different stereotypes, and maybe somebody, a woman who is beyond the age of 47, she may benefit from being seen as more grandmotherly, which is why it's not going to impact her career prospects so much, right? As has been quoted by Laura Cray here, all right? When we read further, it says women around the age of mid-30s to late 40s also face what is called the motherhood penalty, because we have these assumptions that are peddled around parenting duties that lead people to believe women are less committed to the workplace goals, to their careers than men, right? And this can have drastic consequences that are evident in hiring, promotions, wages, right? And there is also hyper scrutiny and skepticism, which harks back to perceptions of likability versus agency, keywords, okay? Gendered networks with men gaining greater access, okay, to senior leaders. They become cemented mid-career, pose another difficulty for working women, right? And there are negative perceptions of women in middle age, right, which can also be linked to stereotypes around menopause, okay? So it's all really stereotypical in nature, right? That leads to a lot of these gaps in gender. Now, another study has been mentioned where psychologists study the attitudes of people towards women in different reproductive stages. And they found that while the pregnant women or the woman with the baby were thought about in glowing terms, menopausal women. So this is in continuance of this statement where it says that there are stereotypes around menopause also. Okay. So menopausal women were associated with negative emotions, illness and aging. So overall, the passage is really analytical in nature. A lot of factors this time around have been talked about, which lead to this increasing gender gap between men and women in the workplace scenario. Okay, let's look at the questions one by one. Now, which of the following is most likely to be true if the author's statements about gendered networks in the workplaces are true? We'll go through the options one by one, right? So what is the author's stand on gendered networks in the workplace? That men are, as they age, they are still viewed in a very consistent light. Age doesn't really affect their chances of, getting hired or promoted, etc., as much as women get impacted. So mid-career women do not find it as easy to get access to senior leaders who are usually male as their male colleagues. They therefore find career progression and new opportunities easier to come by. Till this part, it's correct. But then you should find these opportunities difficult or harder to come by, not easier. So the second statement cancels option A. Mid-career women find it easier to get access. No, they don't find it easier. They find it difficult. So option B is out. Mid-career women do not find it as easy to get access to senior leaders who are usually male. They therefore find career progression harder to come by. What I like about the question is it looks really wordy. really big options, but it's so easy, right? You just need to be really mindful and vigilant of the keywords. Option C is the best option choice. No, again, option D, the first statement only is going to help you cancel the options, right? They find it easier. No, they find it difficult to get access to senior leaders, as has been given in the passage. Now, what, according to the author, is most likely to be an outcome of what the author describes as a motherhood penalty, right? So, motherhood penalty is where, a woman who's a mother is more likely to be viewed as somebody who's not that committed to her goals compared to a man. So, people are more hesitant to hire men. No, they're more hesitant to hire women from the mid 30s to late 40s. Factually wrong. Option A is. People are more hesitant to hire women from the mid 30s to the late 40s, but maybe more willing to hire men of a similar age, right? And the best option choice is option B. This is essentially what is the outcome, right? Women who have children are less committed. They are thought of as. This is not true at all, not at least as far as the wording of the passage goes. So D is out. Women from the mid 30s to the late 40s always prioritize parenting responsibilities. No, that's not given only. So C is out. B is the best option choice. Next question. Which of the following would be the most likely outcome based on the information provided in the passage? Which is that if professors' evaluations are the most important criteria in awarding promotions. Again, this is going to be really easy, believe me. Just go through the options one by one with me. Male professors are likely to be promoted at an even rate because it's going to be consistent. The keyword consistent was mentioned, right? At an even rate throughout their career, while women professors would experience a lower likelihood of promotion in the mid-career stage. Absolutely correct information. A has to be the correct option. Let's still read the rest of the options. Since there is a wide disparity between the evaluations of male and female professors that they receive, the practice of relying upon such evaluations will quickly be abandoned. Nowhere has the author mentioned this, so B is out. Male and female professors will receive promotions at a similar rate. There's a wide discrepancy here, right? So C is out. Women professors are likely to be promoted at an even rate. In fact, the other way around is the correct option, which is that male professors. So D is out. It's not given for women professors. The passage entirely paints a really negative picture of how women are perceived in the workplace. So A is the best option choice. Focus on the next question. Which of the following was the author most likely to disagree with? The best option choice is D. Women going through menopause are more likely to be perceived positively. They are to be perceived negatively. So this option is better than all the other options because it runs in direct contradiction to the information given in the passage. Right? Option A is really irrelevant. It's not given itself. Women going through menopause are more likely to be perceived negatively at the workplace and to have difficulty achieving professional success. This is something that the author definitely agrees with. Hence, it's out. We have to choose that which the author disagrees with the most. Women going through menopause should be permitted to take a mid-career sabbatical, right? This is something that the author is likely to support, right? So that's also something that the author can, maybe in a way agree with, but not necessarily disagree. Best option is option D. Next question, you have to strengthen the main argument in the passage. Several independent studies conducted in different countries have shown that women in the workplace are perceived positively. You read this and you can cancel option A. They are perceived negatively. Several independent studies conducted in different countries have shown that women in the workplace are perceived negatively and are unfairly treated as they age. The best option choice is option B. The studies mentioned have been discredited. That information is not given itself. You have to strengthen the main argument, which is, just how women are perceived negatively in the workplace. Option D here is the best option choice. D says the studies mentioned were conducted on very small sample sets. How is this strengthening the argument? If anything, it only weakens it when you cannot really generalize it, right? So D is wrong here. And the next question is you have to weaken Laura Cray's argument. Laura Cray's argument is that after the age of, let's just say, 45, 47, women are again started to be perceived positively because they're seen as more grandmotherly. So you have to weaken that. What if they are no longer viewed as grandmotherly and they are viewed as somebody who might be really inefficient, slow, and outdated? So if you're able to follow my explanation, you know that the best option choice to directly weaken her argument, you have to locate the argument in the passage, is option C, right? So D is out because it strengthens it. If they're grandmotherly, they are being viewed positively, right? Same is the case with option B. It strengthens it, right? And same is the case with option A. It strengthens it. Only option C weakens it because they're being now viewed in a negative light. Let's focus on the next passage. It talks about the author trying to understand why we are bothered so much by the negative news. And the author now looks at some factors. In the first paragraph, he says, one reason why we are so susceptible to the doom and gloom of the news is a negativity bias, which means since ancient times, we've been wired to believe more in the negative. That has to do with the hunting, gathering instincts where it was appreciated to be a little more fearful than not be fearful at all. Second is we are burdened with an availability bias. We assume just because we can easily recall examples of a given thing, we assume that thing is relatively common, right? And when on a daily basis we're being bombarded with horrific stories, we tend to lodge it in the memory and it completely skews our view of the world, right? So in this digital age, the news we're being fed is only getting more extreme, right? It's something really unlike a lot of things that we generally follow. Right? In the old days, journalists didn't know much about the individual readers. But the people behind Facebook, Twitter, Google know you well. They know what shocks and horrifies you. They know what makes you click. They know how to grab your attention, right? And they know how to do it by serving you the most lucrative helping of personalized ads. Okay, so this modern media frenzy is nothing less than an assault on the mundane. Mundane means something which is boring, right? And now boring news is not being given to us because the lives of most people are pretty predictable, nice but boring. So while we prefer having nice neighbors with boring lives, boring won't make you sit up and take notice. Nice doesn't sell ads. You have to give something really different, something extreme, something negative, something that really catches you off guard. And so Silicon Valley keeps dishing us up ever more sensational clickbait because boring doesn't sell. Knowing fully well that news is to the mind what sugar is to the body, right? So news is something that we, keep on consuming because it's just a habit, right? So this is the metaphorical assessment of this statement. Right? So that's all there is to the passage. Really small. Take just no more than 1 minute to read and understand it. And then we'll focus on the questions one by one. The first question, now you have to weaken the author's argument. Argument is not mentioned, but what we have to do is go through the options one by one. Behavioral traits that helped us in the days when we were hunter-gatherers continue to be present in modern-day humans, which actually tells us this is why we have the negativity bias. So there is nothing contradictory in this statement. It only gives more credence. Look at B. Behavioral traits that helped us in the days when we were hunter-gatherers are no longer found in modern-day humans. If these behavioral traits, such as that of negativity bias, is no longer in us, then we should not be susceptible to the doom and gloom of the news, right? So this is the best option choice that weakens the author's argument. Next question. Now, which of the following is the author most likely to agree with? Multiple times, throughout this logical reasoning section, we have seen these kind of questions now. So contemporary media continuously exposes us to exciting news and information, which may be just like the things we usually experience. What we usually experience in our lives are mundane things, monotonous and boring things. So we cannot say these are just like the things we usually experience. Option A is out. Look at B. It exposes us to exciting news and information, which may be very unlike the kind of things that we usually encounter. B is the best option choice, right? No. Contemporary media does not expose us to boring news. You remember the word sensational clickbait. Right? So the best option choice here becomes option B, right? And again, you can eliminate D because it only exposes us to sensational news. Look at the next question. Based only on the author's statement that we prefer having nice neighbors with boring lives and the author's argument about the nature of news that modern media exposes us to, which of the following would the author be most likely to agree with? Look at A. Constantly being exposed to negative news gives us a warped perspective of the world. See, this is a little too extreme an option to choose. Cancel option A. In our hunting gathering days, it was better for us to be unnecessarily scared rather than being scared too little. Okay, but this is not something which is really relevant to this argument to be implied from. So B is out. The news modern media exposes us to is just like a day-to-day experiences. Absolutely wrong. Best option choice is D. The news modern media exposes us to is very different from our day-to-day experiences. This is what we can most likely agree with based on this information. Take a look at the next question. If the author's statements about negativity bias is true, you have to choose an option which provides support for the conclusions which are given amongst the options. More like a strengthening question. The best option choice is C, because we tend to focus more on something that's negative. We are more likely to notice a story about increasing pollution levels than a story about improving educational levels in schools. So negative over positive, right? So option B is wrong because it shows that we rely more on the positive. So that's out, right? Same is the case with A. We rely more on the positive news, right? So A and B are definitely out. B says we are more likely to form our opinion of the world based on the information available to us, rather than information we do not have access to. So this is definitely there, but the best conclusion, the best support will be option C. Better option choice is option C. Next question. Now, which of the following would be the most effective way of countering the effects of what the author describes as our availability bias? And the best option choice is ensuring that we seek out news sources and stories that we may not otherwise have been exposed to. Look at it. Ensuring that we do not seek out news sources that we may not otherwise have been exposed to. But still, how does this in a way counter the availability bias? We need to be more mindful of the content that we consume, right? Again, following only one source will give us a very warped perception. Avoiding all positive stories is a really extreme option choice to choose. The best option choice is option D, the best. Next question, and this is the last question for this passage. You have to figure out the assumption. And the best assumption for this argument as taken from the passage is that our ideas about the world are shaped by the information we are exposed to. Because if this wasn't the case, we wouldn't be writing the passage in the first place, right? So just based on the information we are exposed to, that's how our ideas are primed. So if it weren't for this, then we wouldn't talk about the fact that newspaper is, or different sorts of media are bombarding us with different facts, and this can just lead to a lot of negativity bias, availability bias. Best option choice is option A. Rest are really irrelevant. Modern media is concerned only, that's not given with making massive profits. Profits has been touched in just one small word, so that's out. Modern journalists generate news stories much faster than in the old days. That too is out. It's not relevant here. Humans once lived as hunter-gatherers, absolutely out of context. Just make sure that whatever option you choose, it's in tandem with the framing of the question, the idea of the question, right? So this was it. I hope you found everything helpful. Let me know in the comment section if you have any doubts. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.